Yes, good morning everyone. 1 hour of 3 coming up right now. The time
To be back. Did I miss anything in Baku? Probably the best race of the season. some stage today. So what will that mean for the drivers who can lose anywhere up to 5 kilos during the course of the race? It's going to be pretty hot in the cockpits, and we're about 3 minutes away from the first practice session, which takes place in the lights. Albeit when it gets dark on the track, everything's going to be taking place on the lights, or in the lights, and under the lights here, it just looks like daylight when you're in a car. Jamie Chadwick, 3-time W Series champion, winner in Indy Next as well. Welcome to the commentary box for your debut session here in the Sky commentary box. Great to have you here, champ. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm happy to be in the air conditioning. It's warm out there for sure.
Yeah, it is a touch. Would you fancy racing out there though today?
Oh, I'd love to. We raced here back in 2022. Slightly different track layout back then, but still such a special track. And track conditions now obviously going to be not the most representative for the rest of the weekend, but still I think any opportunity to drive a track like this, street track obviously used day to day by your normal roads and by the road cars. So yeah, it's got a special history to this place.
It's a street circuit, but it's a grippy street circuit, and I think the most grippy of the street circuits we go to in Formula One. But do you feel the difference from session to session, the more laps that the rubber gets put down on?
Massively, session to session, and then also later in the day as the track temperature is cool. Track temperature isn't hugely high because the lack of sunlight here, but the ambience very high. So as soon as that starts to cool, the engines, the downforce, everything is just at its peak. So yeah, we'll see it get quicker and quicker throughout the day, I'm sure. And it's a lot of track surfaces here, lots of different changes of surfaces, which I think makes it a particular challenge for drivers and for teams to really decipher exactly what their balance is.
Yeah, we'll see when the cars go out. Actually, some bits of the track have been resurfaced from last year. But one thing is for sure, you've been still in the paddock for the last hour, there is a buzz around this place because we've got ourselves a championship on our hands, and not just one but two. The constructors and the drivers are very much alive, and I just felt it going in. There's an air of anticipation off of what we saw in Baku.
It's hugely intense. It's not long ago we're sat here talking about Max winning the championship at this point in the season, so the fact that, you know, we're now really looking at a battle coming into its own is very, very exciting. It's also, if you see Franco Colapinto, the battles are all the way down the grid. You know, the mid-packer is still fighting for points every weekend. You've got McLaren now really starting to stride ahead a little bit in the constructors, but yeah, it's an exciting time now.
Yeah, you mentioned Franco Colapinto scoring his maiden points, of course, in Baku, and Williams now just 5 points, just 3 points ahead of Alpine. They've moved into 8th place and 13 points behind Haas. They can still target, I think, 7th place by the end of this season if they get another result like they did in Baku.
Absolutely, and they've got upgrades this weekend as well. So yeah, they're going to be targeting points now, I think, for the foreseeable, and that's going to really make the difference if they can get to that top 7 of the championship.
Lights about to go green in 5 seconds' time. Joining Jamie and myself in the commentary box here, Anthony Davidson, who's been a bit tardy in his approach from the paddock to the commentary box. Could have done with that McLaren rear wing that you've been analysing on the Sky pad. You might have got here a bit quicker.
A bit of a Sky pad debrief, Cropty, before getting up here. So
did you hit it with a really big hammer? Is that the debrief you gave it?
I'm not giving away any secrets, but wanted to is the answer.
Right, cars are out on the track. We've been talking about anticipation, excitement, a buzz. The fans are very much feeling that and have been expressing their delight in what they're seeing on the track at the moment. That, by the way, is a new livery for the Mercedes car celebrating the 50th anniversary of their fuel and oil supplier. But there is a definite buzz around this place, and we go into the weekend.
Yeah, potential change helmet for the next run. There's too dark visor. Copy that.
Yeah, he's picked up the wrong helmet, isn't he?
What you need is some really bright lights around the circuit to brighten things up a bit.
There's a couple of them out there, but you don't want the dark visor just yet.
I think this place is a bit of a battle for that. And actually, if you look, the weather's not super sunny, so yeah, clearly he's picked up a visor that's maybe made for later tonight when the lights are shining in their faces.
Yeah, there's the visor, and we're on board with Joe Guan Yu. And I was about to say, before we heard from the Sauber driver, we go into a race again not knowing at all who's going to come out on top, and isn't that great?
It's absolutely brilliant. This is what we all tune in for, isn't it? Everyone watching back at home, or however you're watching Formula One these days. It's so exciting coming to races not knowing the outcome.
You see, Max Verstappen, the trouble is there's a lot of cars ahead of him at the moment when he's out on the track, and even in the pit lane too. There's Pierre Gasly coming out and realising that these things have got the turning circle of combine harvester at the best of times.
Hasn't Max been caught out with that this year already? I can't remember which race it was, but wasn't there a bit of damage to the front wing?
Yeah, he came out, was it?
Silverstone last year, he came out of the pits, and I think that was one of the only times he did damage in that season, which is crazy to think of.
But he's had a couple of people, I think, getting his way in the pit lane so far this year. Because it's FP1, you'll see a lot of those aero rakes on the back of the cars, and we'll talk about RB in depth with their team principal, Lauren Merkis, in a little while. But let's hone in on Daniel Ricciardo. And the word on the streets of Singapore is that this, at least for the rest of this season, could well be Daniel Ricciardo's last race that we see him in a Formula One car. There's a potential that he comes back next year, but I think that's a huge shame if this is the end now and not in Abu Dhabi.
And there is the man to the right-hand side, Liam Lawson, who has driven for that team, albeit under a different name, in the past, and did a very good job. And he is the driver that people are suggesting may be the one to replace Ricciardo, if he is replaced after this race, of course. But they have a pool of drivers, as we know, at Red Bull. Whether you're in the A team or the B team, it's at their discretion, it seems, isn't it, where they place you and when. So Ricciardo is waiting there on tenterhooks. Whether he is to be replaced after this race, we don't know. We don't have the full facts, but yeah, he's a big character. It would be a shame for, I think, Formula One in general if we were to lose him, if this was his last Grand Prix ever. But time will tell.
You two are experienced racing drivers across many categories. You've experienced the highs, you've experienced the lows. If this is to be a low for Daniel Ricciardo this weekend, is that just the nature of motorsport, or is it especially tough on him?
It is a cutthroat business. I think you could argue it's especially tough on him, but you could argue it's especially tough on Liam. He sat in this car last year, did a stellar job, and then was left without a seat. I think he was told just before qualifying he wasn't going to have a seat. So I think it's the tough nature of it. It is cutthroat. You have to perform. It's a performance business. These are 20 of the best drivers, 20 of the best drivers in the world, and you've got to earn that seat. I would argue Daniel, back in his Red Bull days, definitely, obviously deserved it, but in the last few races in particular, but last few years, he's not had that form, and I think that's where big decisions have to be made by Red Bull. Yeah,
and I think what Red Bull want to do is see how Liam Lawson gets on against Yuki Tsunoda in the current car, and then make decisions on the back of that for next year. George Russell with a 1:37.8 is 7 tenths behind his teammate Lewis Hamilton. Made that 1.7 seconds behind his teammate Lewis Hamilton, and Charles Leclerc without that goes into third place. These are early stages. Track evolution, as Jamie was saying, is high here. These times aren't exactly relevant just yet. What is relevant is what's happening down at McLaren. Ted Kravitz.
And an update is that, Oscar Piastri, Crofty, will be hoping this session is the least relevant of the weekend because he's missing more and more minutes as the session goes on. So they have finally got the wheel off the car, and they have managed not to damage the hub. Now, that's the important thing. They need to understand exactly what happened. I think they're going to defer that for a later time throughout the weekend, because what they needed to do to understand whether the rear wheel could actually go back on, the hub could be tightened up with the nut, and then Oscar could go out. The answer to that, Crofty, appears to be yes, it's all okay, and that's why they've told Oscar Piastri to get ready, get his racing suit on, get his balaclava and helmet on, and he will be going out in the next 5 or so minutes. So, when in doubt, hammer and chisel. That will solve everything on a Formula One car.
Doesn't just apply to sky pads, it applies to F1 cars as well. Here's Lewis Hamilton, avoiding the wall, but sliding his way around the corner. Look at the dust that is coming up. It's like we're racing in Bahrain, the amount of dust that's coming up off the surface there.
And that's the track evolution we're talking about. That should start to disappear and be gone as the rubber goes down throughout the weekend. So they're going to be sliding around. Their read on the balance isn't going to be quite what they're going to want, obviously, but it's early days of this session, and it's only going to get better from now on in.
Franco Colapinto then in the Williams, scoring his maiden Formula 1 points. Last time out, scored 4 times as many points in 2 races as Logan Sargent did in 36 with the team, and managed to out-qualify Alex Albon as well. I know it's just 2 races, but does that vindicate Williams' decision to say, thanks Logan, but we're going to seek someone elsewhere?
I believe so. I think he's driving well. He's obviously done brilliantly in the junior categories as well. And I think it was ultimately, I think it's the right decision, and he justified that as well in his performance from the last race.
It's a bit of a new lease of life in the team as well. He's young, he's hungry. I think Logan had been beaten down a lot repeatedly after just not quite performing, hearing in the media that he might be losing his seat, whereas Franco's come in, he's Argentinian, he's got a huge sort of vibe about him, and the team love it. So to come in this early and score points is kind of the morale boost I feel like the team needs.
And good points as well, a very good haul of points. Watching his progress through the race, he did what Ollie Bearman did at the start of his career, in his first race. He kept his nose clean, kept out of trouble, and he was there to take advantage right at the end. And I thought it looked like a really accomplished, mature drive, and we'll see what happens when he can start to push it a bit more and feel a little more comfortable in the car.
It's good. It proves that Williams, they've got a good eye for talent, and they know who they should be putting in the car from this point. So, and you can only expect bigger and better things from Colapinto as well as he progresses and gains that experience and becomes more of a rounded, more mature driver.
However, there are 2 drivers already in that Williams seat for next year, Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. So, where does he go in terms of next season, or is he looking like he might have to spend a year on the sidelines?
I think it depends how he performs in the next few races. I think 2 races, yes, have been very impressive, but it's such early days, and we know how quickly things can change in Formula 1. So I think there's a lot riding on performance in his position. And the one thing about Franco is he dances on the limit. We saw in Baku, he put it in the wall in FP1. Even now in his first push lap, he's already up against the wall. So I think he's got to keep performing. If he wants an opportunity next year, I think the only available seat to him is going to be potentially the Audi seat, which is quite funny how quickly Formula 1 turns around, because he was never in frame for that until he got this seat a few weeks ago. So really he's sort of put himself in the frame to be in Formula 1. I think he's got to perform over the next few races, but he's given himself the best opportunity to do that.
First Argentine driver to score in F1 since Carlos Reutemann. South Africa in 1982, which I do believe, Jamie, was many years before you were born. 16 years before you were born. I mean, and you were small and in short trousers in 82.
I remember those days well, Crofty. My black and white TV on, it's mega. Look at this though, speaking of mega, this is on board with Verstappen, your championship leader, of course, and hoping for a better weekend than what he had last time here, and also last time out in this car. He tops the timesheets for now, checking both mirrors there, left and right.
But here's his challenger. And out on the track, already going purple for the first 2 sectors. 1:33.44 for Verstappen, half a second quicker, Lando Norris. It's only FP1, it's only their first laps. How important is it, though, that Lando just hammers in a time that says, whatever you got, Red Bull, we've got some more coming for you?
I remember speaking to Ross Brawn about this, and we were talking about Michael Schumacher. He said, yes, he likes to go out in FP1, a bit like a dog marking its favourite lamppost, likes to mark his territory.
Yeah, stay away from the lamppost here, though. Well done, George. You've managed to do that. But I do think there's something in that, though. When you're in a title battle, as you have been, and you've come out on the right end of it, Jamie, you want to get on the track and tell the opposition that you are absolutely in control here.
You want people to think they need to chase you, and I think for Verstappen, he's done his first push lap. He probably isn't super happy with the car, but when he hears he's got half a second to find, or that's the delta to P1, he's going to really start to question. He'll visualise how much is half a second, where is that lap time? And if he can easily say, okay, there's a couple of things I can improve or can change in the balance, then great. But if not, that's when it becomes painful. And we've seen the last few races have been like that for Verstappen. He says he's rolled out and straight away he feels like the car isn't there and he's not able to fight at the front. This has always been a bad track for Red Bull. I'd love to know the reason why, because even in their sort of more dominant years last year, it's still the one track that seems to get away from them.
The only track that Red Bull didn't win at last year, and the only track on the calendar that Max Verstappen has never won at. And we'll come back to Max and Red Bull in a moment. You can analyse their problems and what rear-end instability is doing to that car. But first of all, to a man who's got his feet firmly planted with no instability down the pit lane, Ted Brothers.
Well, now we've got another Australian who is having a bit that doesn't want to come off his car, Crofty, and that's the aero rake on the back of Daniel Ricciardo's RB. So normally it does take a while for these aero rakes to come in, and the mechanics just detach all the fixings, and it comes off quite easily. But this one on the back of Danny Rick's car is actually left a little bit that requires fixing. That's where you can see the mechanic on the right-hand side as we look at it, with the chief engineer just supervising things above the rear wing. And all this is losing Ricciardo now a bit of time. Happy to report that Oscar Piastri is now on track. So there wasn't hub damage. That's confirmed. There wasn't hub damage to that McLaren. Yeah, if you're noticing something different on the livery of this RB, I'll let you explain that, Crofty. But yeah, now that they've removed the aero rake, they have a bit more fixing to do to a little bit of damage that's left on the car. But yeah, it's quite the alternative livery, this RB, isn't it?
We like the status quo, and I only mention that because isn't it the denim livery that we're seeing on the RB, Ted?
It is, yeah. It is. We've got a couple of different liveries. If you see a car that looks like a Mercedes coming towards you on the camera, but you think it's green on the front and it looks like an Aston Martin, you're not alone. It's not an Aston Martin. It's just that they've got the colour of their main title sponsor on the nose cone of the Mercedes, and in deference to one of their clothes sponsors, the RB looks like a pair of jeans. Double denim on the RB.
It's Singapore, isn't it? New liveries abound as Hulkenberg locks up at the end of the DRS zone going into turn 16, and the drivers are going to have to dial themselves into that turn a little bit because it is that new DRS zone for this year. And this is George Russell. There doesn't seem to be a lot of grip as he went through that particular chicane.
No, this is a good shot, and to show the rear just getting away from him. As we saw with Lewis a few laps before, with the rear moving around on the exit of 13. So, yeah, that's proving to be quite a tricky corner for all the drivers, whether you're blocking up like Hulkenberg did and running a bit wide with understeer, or losing the rear mid-corner. So if you've got a bit of tailwind as well going into that corner or through it. But, yeah, interesting that Mercedes, one of only a few teams that are on the hard tyre. You've got Norris and McLaren, you've got the Red Bull as well on the mediums. So it's at this stage where the teams are deciding what's our race tyre. Yeah. And basically the tyre that they're using now, they believe won't be their race tyre on Sunday.
Or the other set that they're saving of the hard tyres will be their race tyre, and they need some data on it. And they want to have a look at the mediums when the track's a bit more rubbered in. It should be a one-stop here, shouldn't it?
It's always going to push you to a one-stop. Like Monaco, it's incredibly hard to overtake here, hence the extra DRS zone that's been implemented for this season. I'm not sure it's going to make all the difference in the world, but you never know. We did see a few cars draw side by side going into turn 16 last year, so hopefully we'll be able to see a bit of overtaking. But yeah, this man we're riding on board with, Carlos Sainz, drove a very tactical race last year, driven from the front, and was able to use that kind of method of this circuit not offering up much overtaking to great advantage to keep his opposition at bay.
Well, he kept Lando Norris in DRS range, which kept Lando between him and the Mercedes, who were infinitely faster at that stage than the Ferrari. It was great tactics.
Very good tactics. I think it's that kind of DRS train effect that he was just manipulating through the lap, and I think that's where this track does lend itself to opportunities like that, but at the same time, it's still a fine line that they're crossing with that. It takes one small mistake at a track like this for that all to unravel. So he drove a very, very impressive race last year.
How bumpy is it out there?
It's a classic example.
Yeah, that was good timing for that question, wasn't it?
It's a lot bumpier than I think it looks. I think these surface changes that you see, the fact that obviously it is, you know, a normal road surface, it's a lot bumpier. So it rejoins right in the front.
It rejoins right as Piastri was on the push lap there.
Yeah, I think the stewards might have a little look at that. He might get a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, it'll be no more than a slap on the wrist, but you're meant to rejoin the track when it's safe to do so. I'm not sure when a car's coming into that particular zone that is a safe time to come and rejoin the track.
Thing is that there would have been, or I hope there was, a yellow flag as well, whether it was a double waved yellow after it, there should have been at least, and then therefore drivers approaching that corner should be slowing down and preparing to stop. Yeah. So yes, Sergio, you could argue is a potentially, there's the yellow flag, so it's a single yellow. So he's rejoining. He thinks about finding a gap there, but Verstappen as well. That's down at turn 14, isn't it?
It is. At the end of the Esplanade. Which bits are bumpier than others? Do you remember?
I think there's been, my memory is a bit poor on this, but I think there have been a few new service changes, as we mentioned earlier, that have probably caused it to be more bumpier. But for me, down into turn 16, it looks like with that DRS zone, visually it looks like they're approaching it with a lot more speed. So I think that looks to be, if anything, more tricky now with the DRS zone, bringing more speed into that chicane.
Oh, it's funny you say that, because I was talking to someone today who's been out in the medical car, was saying, yeah, it might be okay for the F1 drivers. They might be braking a little bit after the bump, but on approach 216, there is a bit of a bump there, and it can throw you out a little bit.
I think what that looked like with Checo especially is obviously their braking zones are a little bit back at the moment. It's early on in the session, so really the braking zone's probably on that bump. If they're looking to be braking after the bump, come qualifying or whatever it is, then right now it's probably right on that bump.
Valtteri Bottas, who amazingly, for a man of Valtteri Bottas's talent, is plumb last in the Drivers' Championship for this year, on countback to his teammate Joe Guan Yu, and hasn't actually finished last in any race so far this season. But it has been a season of struggle at Sauber in a car that is clearly off the pace. And bar China, which I think was their one shining light when he got into Q3, and Joe did as well, it just hasn't been there for him. And well, this could be Valtteri Bottas' last season in Formula 1 too, and it looks like Franco Colapinto was rather holding up Valtteri Bottas as they went through the final couple of corners. This has been another season where, you know, Valtteri's capable of way more than his car is allowing him to show.
Yeah, Valtteri would be pretty annoyed at what happened there just at the end. I know it's only a free practice, but I'm sure he'll be having a few words either to his team or to Colapinto himself after the session, because, yeah, a little bit rude, but yeah, they carry on their way in this practice session. But Bottas, it's the same for Joe. When the car's not there for you, you watch other drivers coming in, say Ollie Behrman, for example, jumps in a Ferrari one race, scores points, jumps in a Haas the next time, scores points. It must be infuriating. It is infuriating when you see that happening to other drivers and just get the luck of the draw, it seems, by getting in better equipment, allowing them, serving up that opportunity. And you're out there doing the best you can, and the car's just not, it just hasn't been there for them this year, has it? Apart from, like you say, that one race in China.
I heard Valtteri saying earlier in the week that he feels like some of the laps he's doing or some of the driving he's doing is as good, if not better, than what he was doing at Mercedes, and he's just got nothing to show for it. I think he would say that because obviously he's potentially out of a job for next year, and he obviously wants to put himself in the best light regardless of not having any points on the board, but it does showcase how difficult it must be driving in that kind of region. You know, they're not really able to fight for much any weekend, and I think for someone, I think he's in the top 10 of having so many podiums in his career, to then be in that position must be a strange feeling.
Yeah, that's why they have points all the way down to last place, depending on, you know, well, down to 20th if 20 cars finish. But that's not going to happen. Just managed to sit and knock something off my stool there. I'll put that to one side. Right, Oscar Piastri, who was out on the track and just cruising after a lap. He's got it 14th, 1:34.8 for his fastest time so far.
So here are the yellows. Yeah, so the yellows were there. So yeah, Piastri's obviously done the right thing. He has reduced the speed, and there's only so much you can see from when you're inside the car. You're so cocooned in there, and you've got to go at some point, and if there's that's why you rely on the flags as a driver to put you in a safer position.
This was the Colapinto Bottas, no flags here of course, just Williams charging through the last couple of corners in terms of harvesting the energy and holding back. No, I don't think we heard that. We just heard a lot of static on the radio, which is it's worth making the reference point here that radio communications around Singapore are not easy at all. The teams desperately try and make sure you can be heard all the way through a lap. Exactly. It's one of his pet jokes, and I'm not falling for it, Jamie. I'm really not falling for it. Been working with you too long, Anthony Davidson. But it is. Communication can be a real problem with the radios here.
I actually never knew that, but the teams and the drivers are so reliant on good radio comms, so that really does add a different challenge to the mix, I guess, as Leclerc goes quickest by a pretty decent margin on the hard tyre.
Yeah, that's driver dialing in, that's track evolution. We're going to see these times get faster and faster. 1:32.7. This time last year, the fastest time in Q1 was a 1:33.3 by Charles Leclerc. So we're already 6/10 faster than we were last year. Sebastian Vettel with 5 wins. The most successful driver around the streets of Singapore, where at the moment Charles Leclerc has the fastest time with a 1:32.7. Lando Norris with a 1:33.1, second fastest, ahead of Carlos Sainz, who won, of course, the race this time last year. When you say, Jamie, that you didn't know that the radios were an issue and a problem, is that because no one talks to you during the course of a lap anyway, or your radio was working absolutely perfectly?
I never recall having an issue here. I mean, we only raced once here, but I don't recall. I never actually knew that was a thing, so.
Oh, and then you've got the underground train lines as well that play havoc with the electronics.
Ah, yeah, of course.
They have to fit things to the car, but yeah, no, it can be an issue. Basically, you've got streets in between skyscrapers,
Oh, yeah, of
and
course.
going quite a long way around. But as long as we can hear you two in the
Get the
commentary
pit boards back. Do they still run pit boards?
Yeah, they have pit boards in F1, and also as that backup as well is essential. But on top of that, I wonder the question as well, Crofty, is we rely so heavily on DPS for the cars, and we know that in Monaco that's a huge problem, knowing where the other cars are on track, and maybe to give Williams some benefit of the doubt there, perhaps the engineers are a little bit limited in their knowledge of where other cars are on the track, because we all know what happens to GPS when you're in amongst the building as well. Going wide again there, there's Sainz.
So once again, turn 16, that's the corner the drivers are facing at a greater speed than they would have done in the past. Already the lap times are faster anyway, but it's the end of that DRS. So Oscar Piastri, meanwhile, a couple of personal bests through the first 2 sectors. He goes from 14th to 9th fastest on the hard tyre. The top 8 are all back in the pits. One has now put himself into the top 8, and that's Esteban Ocon for an Alpine team that are expecting a much better weekend here than they had at Baku and at Monza. And happy birthday, by the way, to Esteban Ocon, who celebrated his birthday on Tuesday this week. Shares his birthday with the great Sir Sterling Moss and the great and not a Sir Damon Hill.
You could just see, can you, before he even went for the brakes, he was leaving that very late. I'm not surprised to see it go straight on, but it's lucky that the drivers have that bit of a get out, isn't it, through the inside of that corner.
Looks particularly challenging, that turn 16 in this session, to be honest, with the DRS, the added speed. And it's incredible how short the braking zones are in Formula One. They're braking, it looks after the 100 there. It's insane how quickly these cars can come to a stop.
Great though, isn't it? When you step from a junior Formula car into an F1 car, the difference in the stopping distances is just insane.
I think that's what everyone says when they move up from Formula 2 or whatever it is the brakes is the first thing they talk about. You're obviously carrying a huge amount more speed going into the corners, but if anything, you're braking a lot later. So, yeah, it's incredible the level that these Formula 1 cars are operating at and the development that they're making season on season to improve.
Zach Brown back on the pit wall at McLaren. He was in Nashville this time last week at IndyCar. Is it fun in Nashville?
Nashville's always fun. The race was meant to be downtown, actually, a street track, not too dissimilar to this, but we ended up on the oval. So, yeah, they had a good weekend, I think, second for McLaren.
A bit of a lull on the track at the moment, not a huge amount going on. Daniel Ricciardo, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen and Lando Norris going round. The rest have completed their first runs, have headed back into the pits for some setup changes and a quick once-over. Here's a stat for you, Ant, because I know you like your stats.
I love your stats, Crofty.
Oh, bless you. If Lando Norris wins every single race between now and the end of the season, that's all 7 Grand Prix and the 3 sprint races as well, and Max Verstappen finishes second, and Lando takes the points, the bonus point for the fastest lap in every single race, including Abu Dhabi, then Lando Norris and Max Verstappen will go into the last lap in Abu Dhabi level on points, ladies and gentlemen. And we all know what happens on the last lap in Abu Dhabi. Things get a little bit tight. But wouldn't that be another thrilling end to the championship? Now, honestly, an awful lot has got to happen for that stat to come true, and Lando's probably going to have to stay between the white lines a little bit more than he did there. But it just shows you it is possible, and it is in Lando's hands to be able to catch Max Verstappen. Whether he does or not is another matter, but
it's a long shot. Let's be honest, it is a long shot, but he currently sits in the best car. That's why they're leading the Constructors' Championship. And he apparently now has his teammate there as backup, but this is the problem. They've been robbing points off of each other, and Max quite likes that. He's aware of that, so he's not stressed at the moment, as Lando is clearly very much enjoying himself on these opening laps here in FP1.
He's in a top mood today. I saw him just before the session. He's in a very fine mood and well up for this.
And that's what you have to be like on this circuit, any street track for that matter. You've got to be prepared to roll your sleeves up and really get stuck in, and you will get lap time from that. He does just that on that lap. It looks messy. It looks like it should have been more performance there if he just kept it neat and tidy. I'm sure there would have been on the exit of 7. Are we just going to have a look at this now? Probably yes. Yeah, there we go. It beaches the car momentarily. Still on track, but it's not the fastest way around that corner. But apart from that, the feistiness that he displayed through the rest of the lap, the car's on the ragged edge, it's soaring at the wheel, and it's the car's in all kinds of angles. You can actually get away with driving a circuit like this one in that style, and I do think that's the way he likes to drive. In contrast, I believe that Max he's a very precise driver. I don't feel like street tracks are necessarily where we see him at his absolute best. We used to see him get out-qualified and out-raced by Daniel Ricciardo when they were teammates at Red Bull, for example.
And Checo won here, Max hasn't.
And Baku with Checo. I don't think it really, as brilliant as he is, of course, you can't be absolutely perfect everywhere. Every driver, well, you know what I'm talking about, Jamie, every driver has a bit of a bogey track here or there, and I feel like, yes, the car hasn't been here in recent times for Max, but I do feel that other drivers here as well, like Lando, it's just their natural style to be more aggressive and take the car by the scruff of the neck.
I think with Max, it's these kind of slow speed street track corners that seemingly suit Checo more, but I've never thought of it as suiting Max less and that being the way around. I think his commitment in high speed corners, especially on permanent racetracks that we see, is, I think, unmatched, and something where he just gains a huge advantage and really maximises the level of performance in those corners from the Red Bull. But I think they're naturally struggling with those low speed corners at the moment anyway, with the rear instability, and they're complaining a lot. So his issues are, if anything, worse now than they've ever been.
So I wanted to talk about this rear end instability at Red Bull. What's the problem? What can they do to fix it so that both drivers are happy?
They're just, as we know, so many teams bought upgrades this year, and they bring more loads to the car, more downforce, and on paper, it's better. And they see that in the simulations. It's better, it should be faster, but in reality, it messes with the balance. And that balance is more critical for a human being driving the car than a computer, basically. That's the most simple terms I can put it. So a human will always get more spooks, therefore, by the balance not being quite right. And I believe as everyone's following this path of performance, trying to bring more and more load to the car, sometimes they cross over that balance, that threshold, and it spooks the drivers, and you start making mistakes, you start lacking a bit of confidence in your machinery, and it's a big head-scratching moment for a lot of teams out there. Actually, pretty much every team, maybe bar McLaren, have bought upgrades this year so far, or even last year, and gone, why doesn't that work? Let's revert back to where we were. Maybe it was the floor, maybe it's the front wing, maybe it's the rear wing. There are so many components on these cars, mechanical as well. The suspension components that interact with the downforce and the balance of the car is so complex that I believe that's why Red Bull, I wouldn't say lost their way, but haven't managed to bring the load to the car and keep that nice benign balance that they've enjoyed in previous iterations.
And I think one of the issues, visibly it looks, with the balance is it's almost a two-problem car. You see this entry instability. Max needs a lot of confidence to be able to have his usual technique of firing quite a bit of lock-in, firing the entry speed, and he can't really do that, so he's waiting on it, and then he gets this mid-corner understeer, and it's kind of causing him double the amount of issues than it normally would. So it's really not suiting them at the moment. I don't know how easily they can get to the bottom of it, but on contrast to that, Alex Albon with upgrades this weekend seems to be pretty happy with the balance in his car.
Yeah, he's back up third place now, and he was up there before on his previous runs. Put that into layman's terms, what you just said there, Jamie. Is what Max is suffering at the moment akin to what I suffer going around a supermarket when I'm trying to push the shopping trolley a bit too fast? Yeah, and it just will not turn the way I want, and I crash into the baked bean tins instead of actually finding an aisle.
Imagine loading your shopping trolley up with a lot of supermarket shopping, a lot of weight.
That, yeah.
And your first movement is almost like a pendulum. The rear isn't there, it's unstable. That doesn't give you the confidence to put more wheel in, to turn the wheel more. So you wait on it, and then by the time you do add some steering or try and get the car to rotate, it's too late and you get the understeer. So you've got this entry insecurity where you're not confident with the rear of the car on entry, and then you get the understeer in the mid-corner.
Yeah, I used to put my son in the seat at the rear, and I chronic understeer all the time, but you know, the rear end was planted. He's 17 now, I can't do that. So you know, he just won't fit anymore.
As it just so, Tsunoda's gone second fastest, and we rode on board with him momentarily through the last couple of corners, and huge understeer through the high speed, this part of the track here, where Carlos Sainz attacks now. We saw Ferrari running very wide there as he goes second fastest. We saw, I think it was Leclerc the lap before, running very wide in turn 18 and 19. Similar to what caught Stroll out in qualifying here last year, and now running on board with Perez. So a lot less understeer in his car, and with that, more tentative, I feel like, behind the wheel than what I saw. So he was able to just chuck it in, put a whole lot of...
Wow, that is very lap. Copy.
Now, I'm trying to guess what the word was that was bleeped out. If he's talking about his lap, it might not be a positive word. If he was talking about Yuki Tsunoda's or Lando Norris's, it might be a more positive word. Valtteri Bottas probably hasn't got many positive words to say about anything, because there's another lap where he gets blocked. Is this Perez coming out?
Blocked by the Red Bull. Yeah, I don't know what he was doing there.
Put a brand new set of soft tyres on and gets traffic straight away in the second corner.
And that's Sergio Perez coming out.
Sorry, that's the moment I was talking about before, where he really kicks up the dust. So, yeah, a bit of understeer creeps in, gets on the curb, and that's what caught out Stroll last year as well. It's 18, which sends you off in 19. It's not like you've got 19's flat out anyway. It's really hardly a corner, but 18 sets you up for it.
The Red Bull pit wall should have been telling Sergio Perez, watch out, Valtteri's on a hot lap there, and he's going to be round about where you are when you come out. But this goes back to what you were saying, Jamie, about communication here and the GPS as well, that it's tricky, and they might not have seen Valtteri on the track. I don't know, I'm just surmising.
You've potentially given them a great excuse there. I'm not sure. Sometimes in FP1 it feels like, I've never driven in a Formula 1 session before, but I can only imagine it's quite hard to judge closing speeds and what have you. And when you get to the track for the first time, working that out, managing it, you kind of make the mistakes of that in FP1. If you get to qualify and you do that, you get a penalty. So give them a little bit of leeway there. Franco, for example, will be learning a huge amount about this. This will be the third time that he's experiencing how different these closing speeds are in different corners in different parts of the track.
Right, Esteban Ocon, news, Ted Kravitz.
Yeah, just to pick up on what Jamie's saying, that's not the only thing Franco Colapinto is going to be learning about, because Williams are doing quite a lot of back-to-backing of various upgrades that they've had through the system over the last few races. So a bit of a, well, it's purely a test really for Williams across the two cars in this session, but they're both keeping out of the wall so far, so that's good. They're learning lots of good things. On right, Esteban Ocon just making a change to the rear suspension. That's completed. He's out on the soft tyre now. And on Mercedes, talk about flaws on the Williams, Crofty, just to underline what Mercedes are doing with their floor, still no new floor being used. It's still the old floor spec that has been successful both in Baku and in Spa earlier on in the year. So Mercedes not wanting to go back to that, what they thought was going to be the upgraded floor, but just hasn't worked for them in recent races before they decided to stay with the old one, which they're staying for this weekend.
Proving the point that Anthony Davidson was making, and not 5 minutes ago, that not all upgrades come to the track work.
Exactly, and another thing I forgot to mention as well, that these cars are inherently lazy in slow-speed corners on the front end in particular, so that's the challenge for all teams. That Oscar hitting the wall on the exit of 17.
Very, very close to it.
And it wasn't a brilliant lap, actually, in Toto, with Norris topping the timesheet of 31.8. Piastri's down there 6.5 tenths off on his soft tyre run. So, yeah, maybe costing a bit of time as well through that final chicane. But, yeah, to go back to the balance of these cars, all of them, they suffer with inherent understeers. Slow speed. So what you're trying to do is always try to energise the front wing in the slow speed and then bleed that off in the high speed through mechanical balance or through the aerodynamics of the car as well. So that's the challenge for all of the teams to try and get on top of. And with that, naturally, they are inherently a really difficult car to drive, because at one speed, the balance is doing A, and at another speed, it's doing B. So you have to work that out, not only how to drive it, but also how to set the car up.
And that's why we have 3 practice sessions, basically, to give the people in the garage a chance to make some setup changes, and the people in the clever seats at the back a chance to actually work out what the setup changes are. We've gone on to the soft compound tyres. The track is evolving all the time. You don't want to make too many changes too soon. You might put yourself out of a decent range. But at the moment, Lando Norris is fastest, but not by much. And here's the man that was on pole in 2 of the last 3 years here, Charles Leclerc. Tell you what, Anthony Davidson, take us through this lap.
Yeah, so as you head down the main straight towards turn 1, you get over to the right-hand side of the track, grab a little bit of extra road before turn 1 itself, hug the inside of turn 2, compromise that to open up turn 3, fight the bumps on the exit, get on full throttle as early as you can, bring the car to the left-hand side to open up turn 5, and again early on the power and close to the wall into this second of the 4 DRS zones that we have here, through the kink to the right hand side there, get the car to the right, brake just after the 100-metre board into turn 7, don't take too much of that curve on the exit, straight line the braking into turn 8, one of the slow speed corners on the track, the rear gets away from it momentarily, then turn 9, that's a bumpy corner and one that's really hard to navigate the car through. Straight line the braking again, and obviously missed the wall on the right hand side into turn 10, sacrifice the exit of that one to open up 12 and should have taken a bit more curve than that actually. He went for it, but it understeered too much. Over the bridge into 13, the rear gets away from him on turn-in, as we were talking about earlier on. An uncomfortable entry there into that corner. Into the next DRS zone, zone 3, before turn 14. Bit of understeer this time around for Leclerc, bit of a higher speed corner compared to 13. Now into the final zone 4 DRS. To the final chicane that's been tricky all day long so far, and takes it a little bit easier that time around. He's got cars around him as well. Watch out for the wall on the right of 17. And then the final 2 corners come up, breeze off the throttle, back on it, and flat out through 19 to hang on. And that's a much better lap for Leclerc. Missed a little bit in the first sector. Honestly, I don't really see where that went wrong for him, but maybe just the tyres not quite there. Who knows? But yeah, a much better lap in general, and gives you an idea of what could have been. He reported that his lap wasn't the best in the world.
Oh, Fernando, good save.
That was close. I thought that was going to go into the wall there.
Yeah, that's snapping like an angry crocodile at dinner time, quite frankly. I wouldn't have fancied being where Fernando was sat there.
that exit curve is such a fine line. You want to use it almost to slow the car on the exit and sort of rub up against it, but anything further and you get the skid on it, you're on a skateboard rail, and I think that's what Fernando just experienced.
They're showing a replay of this corner in 14, but that was good. Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
I want to see turn 13, where the car looks a little bit tentative, off the Anderson Bridge, turning left.
And you've got tools in the car, don't forget. You've got the e-braking, as we call it, the electronic brakes are going to harvest a bit more when you're braking and gives you a bit more of a handbrake effect. You can turn that up and down. You've got your brake bias and brake migration, how it migrates from front to rear or rear to front, depending on how you've got it set up. And all those tools, the differential as well, all those tools can help you in moments like you had in turn 13, but it's deciding what you do. Is it, do you attack it with the tools in the car, or do you attack it with the actual physical balance and setup of the car? It's an absolute minefield, not an easy process at all to go through.
Made in Yorkshire, you know. E-braking.
Oh, very good.
Seriously.
Not.
Saving that one up for you. So 18 minutes to go in this session, and for Fernando Alonso, it could have been the end of the session had this not resulted in a fabulous save from the 43-year-old driver at Aston Martin. You don't want to get on the curb and on the power any more than he did.
Reactions of a 23-year-old, I'd say there, Crofty. Brilliant stuff.
Our director was just said in my ears, wipe out. And I think what he meant was, we're going to change pictures. Not, that could have been the end for Fernando Alonso. But it wasn't a bad description of what almost happened there. Two Red Bulls on track. Max Verstappen stays out. He was never won here before. Sergio Perez comes in, the man who did win here, of course, in 2022, and led from start to finish. And I think that's the only race he's ever led from start to finish in his career so far. Lance Stroll has just gone 14th. George Russell is down in 15th for Mercedes. Daniel Ricciardo 18th and Yuki Tsunoda 5th. So let's get a status report from their boss, Lauren Meckes, who's on the pit wall at RB for us this weekend. Lauren, how are you coping with the sweat? Is the frizz on the hair getting a little bit extreme? How are you down there?
Look, just to check when you push the pit for Singapore, honestly, button, is that on purpose?
No, to avoid the crash with this car, I push the buttons, all the ones I have.
Excellent. Right, tell us about your car for this week. We have upgrades. Do we have a stable floor that allows you to compete a little bit higher? What are you looking at to compare in this session?
Look, yes, we did bring upgrades a little bit in Monza, more so in Baku. Obviously, we felt they were working. We were not competitive enough, however, in Baku. So we are trying to assess if in this sort of conditions, much higher transport seems to be, we seem to be on the right part of the grid. So at least it looks like we're starting on a good foot.
Lauren, it's Anthony here alongside Crofty. You mentioned the fact that you've split the program. I noticed that you ran different tyres earlier on. One was on the hard. I can't remember which way around it was, but was it Yuki on the medium, Daniel on the hard? I might have it the wrong way around, but what was the idea there, and what have the drivers reported back with the ever-changing circuit with those two different compounds?
Yeah, you know, the idea is not something you can see straight away in FP1, but it's effectively we will reverse the program around for FP2. So what it will give us is a proper compare in FP2, one car long running the hard tires, one car long running the medium tires, and that's probably the most precious information ahead of the race on Sunday. So it has an impact on the FP1 program, but the real benefit for us is to have these cars on the different tires with the long run in FP2.
Laurent, Jamie here. Also, it looks like a lot of the drivers, and you two as well, doing their lap time not on the first push. How much of that is track evolving, drivers getting more comfortable with the track, or is there something that you're finding throughout the session?
You know, you're right. You know, we think it's mainly track improvement and tires getting up to speed. It's a C5 compound. It's the softest of the compound. You know, so we expect that by the time you get to quali, we think it's going to be a one-time lap tire.
Excellent, and in the night time as well, unlike these conditions at the moment. And Lauren, it's a long way to go this weekend. You're going to do a lot of talking, but before people ask you a lot of the same question, I'll get it in first. what's happening with your drivers from Monday onwards? Do we go to Austin with a new driver lineup, and is this the end for the time being for Daniel Ricciardo with RB?
Look, we have had these questions over and over since the beginning of the season. So, you know, I think reviewing drivers' performance every so often is something normal. We have also made it quite public. We reviewed it after the first part of the season. We have done it before the shutdown. We made also quite public that we will sit down together after Singapore. That's where we are really. So nothing decided so far.
Lauren, I appreciate that. Thanks ever so much, and we'll speak to you under the lights in a little while.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Take care. They're getting closer, aren't they, these drivers?
It's normal, you know. You start the session in FP1 at any street track with the walls close, and you feel the proximity of the walls. You're very much aware of them.
Forget driver of the day this week. This is the one that they want to win other than the race. Closest to the wall without hitting it. That 2 centimetres from Alex Albon. That's going to take some beating.
He's also going to love that because he loves track usage. I think whenever you do anything with him on the SkyPad, the first thing he picks up on is track usage. But these cars are so wide now, they have to use all of the track available to them. So sometimes it looks scary close from up here in the commentary box or watching it on TV, but that's really what they have to do to be on the pace.
It's different from Monaco as well, because Monaco, you've got the metal barriers
that give a little
bit of give. A concrete wall like you have here, it's not really going to move that much.
You're going to have to hit it hard to move it.
Exactly. So it's a matter of time, isn't it, before we do see a driver actually hit the wall. Hopefully it won't be too hard when they do, but it's a natural process of a driver getting up to speed on a street circuit.
Here's Yuki Tsunoda behind the Aston Martin of, I think that's Lance Stroll. It is.
Of course, Stroll, man.
He really doesn't like him, does he?
It doesn't matter who it is. I don't think I'd like someone going that slow and getting in my way, to be fair.
It looked like Yuki was on a bit of an outlap himself, though, as well. But yeah, and any opportunity for a little dig, you're gonna
take it. Look, Charles Leclerc has gone back fastest again by 700ths from Lando Norris. His time of a 1:31.7. Compare that to last year's fastest time in FP1. And I know we've got that extra DRS zone here. We were at 1:33.3 for last year, so we're 1.6 seconds quicker in this session with an extra DRS zone.
And new surface here and there as well on the track, which I think, speaking to some of the teams, as you see that strip there on the inside of 13, it's a little bit awkward how it's only a tiny little narrow band, and I don't know how that's probably going to play havoc with the balance, actually, having one bit that offers different grip, or mew as the engineers call it, compared to the rest of the track. So you know, there's going to be a natural bit of lap time there, and speaking to some of the teams, they were in agreement that it should offer up a bit more grip, so there's that to factor in as well. Pole position, of course, is 1:30.9 set by Sainz last year.
Very good, well remembered. I'm impressed with that. Lap record, of course, because we had the changes last year here. 10 minutes to go. Ted Kravitz down in the pit lane. Where are you, sir?
I'm down at the Haas garage, Crofty, because I'm charting the comeback of Kevin Magnussen. K-Mag is back.
We've not really seen much of Kevin Magnussen in the coverage to talk about him, so I'm glad you are. Welcome back, Kevin Magnussen.
Well, let me show you a little bit of what's going on in his car. Front suspension change. So he's seen that the car is good. That was one reason why he was extremely keen to come back, because the car is capable of scoring points. Could have scored points with either driver, both in fact, at the Baku Grand Prix last time out. Only scored points with one in the end. But yeah, Hulkenberg could have scored points as well as Ollie Behrman. And yeah, Kevin is keen to get going with no license points on his license at all. A completely clean bill of health. That says he's not going to go crazy and start bumping into people. It's just an anomaly of the system. But he watched the race, apparently, Crofty, in the gym with his trainer. I don't know whether he was venting some frustration that he wasn't driving in it, but was sort of watching it while working out. It's a nice way to watch a Grand Prix.
Could have joined me on the sofa. It would have been a much better, more pleasant, less sweaty experience.
He might have been jumping up and down on the sofa in excitement of how Charles Leclerc was trying every which way to get past Oscar Piastri and Piastri's brilliant defence. I did ask Kevin about that. He didn't seem too fussed, but I like to think he was just following Ollie Behrman's progress in his car.
Too much understeer.
Too much understeer. Too much understeer, says Lewis Hamilton. I woke my wife up 2 laps from the end in Baku. She'd gone to sleep on the sofa, and then suddenly I went, "Oh no, they crashed!" as Sergio and Carlos came together, and I thought I was commentating again. And she sat bolt upright, like, what? Sorry.
How did you fall asleep during that race?
Well, exactly, and that's what I said to her.
How dare she?
Poorly. We were a bit jet lagged, to be honest, having flown in from Washington the night before. Anyway. The difference between Alex Albon and Franco Colapinto, and I like that, in the middle sector, which is the slower corners. Colapinto's making the most of that, but is Alex Albon just saving a little bit of juice in his tyres, bit of performance life? Who knows?
As Piastri says, he's touched the wall, so the first hitter of the walls is Piastri, but got away fairly scot-free by the looks of things.
Right, that's why they're looking at it, look.
Alex and Franco had slightly different upgrades on the car. I think Alex has taken the upgrades this weekend, so it's interesting actually seeing that difference in sector time. So I think he's touched the front.
Go left.
Yeah, he's touched it, but the main ones, he's knocked the right rear quite a bit more, and all of the logos have pretty much disappeared from that one. There you go.
What's the betting that the corner in question is turn 17? So end of the DRS, 16, then drift wide, 17. That's where they normally get a bit close. No, it's not. It's much earlier in the lap, down by the cricket ground.
Wow, exit turn 10. What a strange place to do it. Basically, he just got on the dust. So he's carried the speed that he would have done on the racing line, drifted a bit wide onto the dust, and you have to be going slower by that point. So, wow, I've never seen that before.
No, he's only doing about 80 miles an hour there as well.
He did quite well to hit that square rather than nosing it in there, otherwise that would have been a lot more damage for McLaren to be repairing in between sessions.
Right, Jamie, we've been building up for this moment where Anthony Davidson is now going to describe the headline of the weekend affecting Kevin Magnussen. Who is Anthony Davidson?
The comeback Viking. Does that work?
The comeback Viking.
It could work.
Can we call him that? I don't think we can, actually.
You got very excited about that when you said
I thought you were going to like it.
I do like it. That's why. Yeah.
He's a Danish Viking, in a way.
It's the kind of thing Crofty would have come out with. I'm surprised I've beat you to it.
No, you are the headline maker for
He's
this
like
week.
a man unleashed, though, isn't he, here in Singapore? I mean, I can't wait to see Kevin Magnussen driving with 0 penalty points on a track where it's all about defensive driving, if you can qualify well.
Do you think it made a massive difference when he didn't have 0 penalty points?
It's a very good question. To be fair, good question. Yeah.
Kevin Magnussen has set his and Haas's only fastest laps ever here in 2018 and 2019. He has reached Q3 here in each of the last 2 years. He qualified 6th here last year. He is back after scoring points in Monza, ladies and gentlemen. After watching the race from the gym, he is like a thoroughbred that's been let off the reins this weekend. And I cannot be more excited to see what Kevin Magnussen comes up with, because deep down, there is a supremely talented driver in that Haas car. Make no mistake, Kevin Magnussen is a fabulous racing driver. Just too often he gets into scrapes, and he has them right from the outset that he shouldn't be getting into, because it just leads to race bans because he's got 12 penalty points.
There's that. I completely agree. I love watching Kevin when he's on the right side of it. Sometimes he takes it too far, and that's frustrating, I think, for everyone to see. But at the same time, this year, I don't feel like we've seen the best of him. Hulkenberg, for sure, in qualifying has put a lesson on him, and I don't think we've seen the best of Kevin.
What was the race? So there was Miami, where...
It was Saudi, the one you were thinking of.
Saudi was great and brilliant, and he got points for the team there by playing a brilliant defensive job. And then Miami, he just took it too far, and the team didn't even ask him to do that. That was very much Kevin making his own mind up as he went along, and that's the conundrum I'm always in with Kevin. You know, what you did in Saudi, brilliant. What you did in Miami, that was over the limit way too often.
I I completely agree. I think it's that line that, yeah, on one day it's fantastic to watch. It's racing right to the limit, and then on the next day it's just too far over it. But at the same time, it's exciting to watch, and he's served his ban, he's taken his penalty. He's back with a vengeance. Let's see what that actually means. I'm not too sure what the Haas competitiveness will be at a track like this, but yeah, I'm excited to watch him out there anyway.
Don't forget, he got a podium his first race, Kevin Magnussen for McLaren, on the day that they were last leading the Constructors' Championship before this race.
As we're on board here with Ricardo, it's interesting to see how slow he is on the steering wheel here. He's another one of those drivers that he's giving the car a lot of time here. And I don't know if he's on a bit of a longer run on these soft tyres, seeing how it looks to me like he's driving more in sort of race mode than full-on attack qualifying mode. And it's great to have the throttle trace, the brake trace as well at the top of on the graphics of the halo.
What's interesting, two different programs Lauren Mekis was explaining, and two different run plans for this session. They'll swap them around for later on, but they've converged, I think, at this stage of the practice session, and there's only a tenth of a second between Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. Ted Kravitz, to you, sir.
A thought from down here at Ferrari, where I know it's a really unrepresentative session in terms of the track temperatures and the night time and the visibility and everything, but this front wing, this new front wing, seems to be working pretty well on the Ferrari. So it's the upper two elements, especially on the outboard section. Not only do they give a bit more downforce as to their position, but also it affects the rest of the car going backwards. And as Leclerc and Sainz underlined yesterday,
I'm trying to reduce this traction metrics. You guys got to fix this, and I'll be as soft as I can. Yeah, sure thing, Lewis. We'll have a recovery session.
So what he's saying there, Crofty Anthony, that he's Jamie, that he's effectively putting the old egg, the unboiled egg, between foot and accelerator, and yet still getting loads of wheel spin.
Once again, having to drive in a completely different way to how he would want to.
Yeah, okay.
But he was also complaining about a lot of understeer earlier, so again, maybe that's the sort of the entry mid-corner balance is a lot of understeer, and then he just can't put power down as he gets to the exits. But yeah, it doesn't sound like he's too happy inside the Mercedes.
Yeah, I can stop the car with the front right. Copy.
And Sergio Perez having very different problems. Back to you, Ted.
Sorry, just to underline what Sainz said yesterday, having lost their way on the upgrades earlier in the season, they've really now understood what makes this Ferrari quicker. And based on the evidence we're seeing in free practice 1, they're looking good for the rest of the weekend.
Thank you, Tedos. Minute and a half to go of this session. Let's sum up what we've seen, who's struggling, who's not, who you feel has got a good baseline to carry forward for the rest of the weekend.
One thing that strikes me straight away, Crofty, is just the poise of all of the cars on this track, one of the bumpiest tracks we have. And they're just, we don't see any porpoising anymore. And that the cars, all of them, have come such a long way since 2022. What we're about to see here with Perez as he goes over the bridge. He talks about the right front not being able to slow down, and yeah, absolutely just grabbing a bit too much there. Just as he's finished turning right, and it's actually locked over the bump as he's turning right. Just at the end of the right-hander of turn 12, it's grabbed, and that's probably why he's commenting he's struggling to slow that front right down. It's working. It's locking up too much there. Ooh. Big old snap for Joe, but sounded like he did lose drive there as well.
It didn't sound very healthy. Yeah, no porpoising.
Yeah,
you see bumps, but that's exactly the track, not the cars.
So they've got a much nicer ride these days for all of the drivers here compared to year 1 and even year 2 of these regulations. But yeah, I'm seeing that the Red Bull looks, although it's got some problems, like Perez just experienced the braking into turn 13. Verstappen seems to have had a better time of things. The Ferraris, like Ted said, I think that car looks strong here. That's the thing that strikes me with the competitiveness there. Whatever they've done to that car for this track, it was quick here last year as well. I think both drivers are completely on it from straight away, and they've definitely got the performance. I'm more interested for this track on the soft tyre runs, performance runs, a bit like Monaco, than I am for the long runs. It doesn't really matter quite as much here.
I think also worth noting, Leclerc's lap wasn't actually that tidy. He did his best time on a second push lap on the soft tyre. A couple of mistakes we saw in there where he's losing the rear on entry, so there's a lot more time in that Ferrari.
Track temperature at the end of this session, 36 degrees. Your average track temperature here is 33 degrees. So it will cool down a bit as the sun sets off to the west and the lights take over for what will be the most representative session before qualifying, and that's FP2. Yes, there's a lot of work to do. Yes, you want to get your baseline setup dialed in. Yes, as a driver, you want to get your eye in too. But there's 60 minutes coming up for FP2. There are possibly the most crucial session of the season. I know we have other night races, but overtaking is so tough here. Qualifying is so vital.
It's where you want reliability on your side. It's where, as a team, you need your drivers to be focused and to not make any mistakes. You can't afford on the one session where you have pretty much the exact conditions that you'll have in qualifying for there to be any problems, any dramas.
And Yuki Tsunoda finishes off in 5th place at a track where it's not exactly been a happy hunting ground. Never finished the Singapore Grand Prix, retired on the first lap last year. Made contact with Sergio Perez in pretty much the same way that he did with Lance Stroll in Baku, but in the slow speed, the low speed corners, quickest of all, albeit Lando Norris absolutely identical, but Yuki got there first. And Max Verstappen only 3 100ths back, and Charles Leclerc only 4 100ths back. It's Oscar Piastri who's a bit adrift in the low speed corners. Last week's race winner, of course, from Baku. And they'll do their practice starts on the grid, because you can't do a practice start at the end of the pit lane because it feeds you straight out into turn 3.
As Bottas found out.
Yeah. We need to sort out the brakes. Cannot be that we change the brake balance. So watch. Understood?
Okay, so that's an early message to say, right, I'm coming in a few minutes' time, and this is what I want to talk about first. And if you can't sort the brakes out here, you really are going to be struggling for 62 laps.
So usually you'd have on a track which is it's got a lot of brake dependency, you will throw a brand new set of discs and pads at it for qualifying, and you tend to run slightly older equipment in the Friday practice FP1, and it can give you a very different feel from inside the car, and that's maybe what he's reporting there. You're going to have a look, because he's either playing around with the brake bias on the fly each lap by corner, which you can do, of course, or he's just generally having to set in quite a big offset of brake bias. So it can be one of two things there for Sainz, but clearly not happy, and one of a few drivers actually complaining about the braking, and that's this circuit. You
2
burnouts on the
burnouts.
brakes.
2 burnouts.
Man, everything too late.
Yuki, we're trying our best here.
Okay, so it's just getting a bit stressful there, and I think that was Yuki going through the RB, doing his 2 burnouts, which is what they'll ask him to do before the start of the race on Sunday as well, just to warm the tyres and brakes.
They've probably been looking at the tyre metrics and looking at it live to see how many burnouts it should take for when the clutch is, how it's going to engage. So that's the process the engineers have been going through. And then you've got the drivers saying, you're telling me all too late. But they're in a race against time before the car makes it, obviously, to the line.
Yeah, get it right, don't have to deliver it instantly. Let's have a listen. That felt nice.
It looks good. So you can see how the drivers just keeping the throttle pedal in the exact right position in first gear. You've got the dash lights on the top, and you've got to keep them in the middle, and before you release that first stage of the clutch.
Anthony, Jamie, thank you very much indeed for your company. What a fun hour that has been. And it has been an hour under the setting sun, with the lights taking hold just a little bit. And the first classification of the weekend, Charles Leclerc picking up where he left off this time last year by leading FP1 from Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz. Max Verstappen, 4th fastest, 3/10 off the pace, and ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, half a second down, and about 1/10 of a second between him and his teammate Daniel Ricciardo. Oscar Piastri in between, and the other McLaren, he was in the garage for a while where they fixed an issue on the hub of his rear left wheel. Albon and then Alonso and Ocon completing the top 10. Outside of this, Franco Colapinto in 11th place, just by a few 100ths of a second. Lewis Hamilton not happy with the tyre metrics in his Mercedes, and just complaining a bit that he's driving one way, but it's not the best way, and he's really struggling to a touch. And George Russell right down there as well. Not the best session for Mercedes, but it's only the first of 3 practice sessions. The big one, the big representative practice session, comes next.